Artificial intelligence already helps decide who gets a loan, who lands an interview, and what shows up in your feed. So the European Union did something no other bloc had done before. It wrote a comprehensive rulebook for AI. In the next few minutes, we'll explain the EU AI Act in plain English, what it covers, who it reaches, and when the key deadlines actually arrive. The EU AI Act is formally known as Regulation EU 2024/1689, and it marks a genuine milestone. It is the world's first comprehensive, horizontal law dedicated to artificial intelligence. Horizontal simply means it applies across sectors rather than targeting a single industry. The same framework touches healthcare, finance, hiring, manufacturing, and public services alike. It entered into force on August 1, 2024, though, as we'll see, its rules switch on in stages rather than all at once. The core idea is refreshingly practical. Instead of regulating the technology itself, the Act regulates how AI is used and how much risk that use creates. A spam filter and a system that screens job applicants are both artificial intelligence, but they carry very different stakes. The law sorts them accordingly, concentrating the heaviest obligations where the potential for harm is greatest, and leaving low-stakes tools largely untouched. That single principle, regulate the use, not the code, is the key to understanding everything that follows. Picture a pyramid with 4 levels. At the very top, the smallest slice, sits unacceptable risk. These are uses considered a clear threat to people's safety or fundamental rights, and they are simply prohibited. The banned list includes government-run social scoring, AI designed to manipulate or exploit people in ways that cause harm, untargeted scraping of facial images to build facial recognition databases, emotion recognition in workplaces and schools, certain kinds of biometric categorization, and real-time remote biometric identification in public spaces by law enforcement, subject to narrow, specifically authorized exceptions. The next level down is high risk. This is the tier the Act cares about most, and we'll spend real time on it in a moment. Below that is limited risk, which mainly triggers transparency duties. The idea there is honesty. People should be told when they are dealing with a chatbot rather than a human, and AI-generated content such as deepfakes should be clearly labeled as artificial. Finally, at the wide base of the pyramid, is minimal risk, the vast majority of AI in everyday use. Think spam filters, recommendation engines, and the AI inside video games. Under the Act, these face no new obligations at all, which is worth remembering whenever the law sounds sweeping. So what makes a system high risk? Broadly, it is AI used in sensitive domains where a poor decision can seriously affect someone's life or rights. That includes critical infrastructure, education, employment and recruitment, access to essential public and private services, law enforcement, migration, and the administration of justice. It also covers AI acting as a safety component of products that are already regulated, such as medical devices or machinery. For these systems, the Act sets out a substantial set of requirements. Providers are expected to run a risk management process across the system's lifecycle, apply strong data governance so that training data is relevant and appropriately representative, and maintain detailed technical documentation. Systems must support record-keeping and logging so their activity can be traced, offer clear transparency and instructions to the organizations deploying them, and allow for meaningful human oversight rather than fully automated decisions with no human check. They also have to meet standards for accuracy, robustness, and cybersecurity. On top of all that, a high-risk system generally has to pass a conformity assessment before it can be placed on the market, essentially a check, conducted in advance, that the requirements have genuinely been met. In practice, this shifts a lot of the work upstream, to the design and testing stage, rather than leaving it as an afterthought once a product is already in use. The Act also carves out a dedicated chapter for general-purpose AI, often shortened to GPAI, the large, flexible models that can be adapted to many different tasks. Here the baseline obligations center on transparency and documentation. Providers of these models are expected to keep technical documentation up to date, share relevant information with the businesses building applications on top of them, and respect copyright-related requirements. A smaller group of models is treated more seriously. When a general-purpose model is powerful enough to pose what the Act calls systemic risk, it faces extra obligations, such as model evaluation, adversarial testing to probe for weaknesses, tracking and reporting serious incidents, and stronger cybersecurity protection. The logic mirrors the rest of the law. The more capable and widely deployed the technology, the more responsibility travels with it. Now the question everyone asks, when does all of this actually apply? The Act deliberately phases its rules in, giving organizations time to prepare. The first milestone landed on February 2, 2025, when the bans on unacceptable risk practices took effect, alongside duties around AI literacy, making sure the people who work with these systems have an appropriate level of understanding. Next came August 2, 2025, which switched on the rules for general-purpose AI models, the governance bodies that oversee the Act, and the penalty provisions. The big one is August 2, 2026, the general date of application, when most high-risk obligations and the remaining rules come into force. And there is one further extension. August 2, 2027 is the deadline for high-risk AI that is embedded as a safety component of already regulated products, which are given extra time to adjust. Read those 4 dates in order and you have the whole story of the rollout, from the first prohibitions to full application. Finally, the teeth and the reach. The Act backs its rules with tiered penalties, scaled to how serious the breach is. The most serious category, breaching the prohibitions on unacceptable risk AI, can bring fines of up to €35 million or 7% of global annual turnover, whichever figure is higher. Most other breaches of the Act's obligations can reach up to €15 million or 3% of turnover, and supplying incorrect, incomplete, or misleading information to the authorities can cost up to €7.5 million or 1%. The tiers make the priorities plain. The outright bans sit at the top for a reason. Scope is deliberately broad. The Act applies along the whole value chain, providers who develop AI systems, deployers who put them to use, and the importers and distributors who bring them to the EU market. And, crucially, it has extraterritorial reach. A provider based outside the European Union can still fall within the rules when the output of their AI system is used inside the EU. In other words, being headquartered elsewhere is not, by itself, a way out. So that is the shape of it: one horizontal law, for risk tiers, a phased calendar, and obligations that scale with the stakes. Whether a given tool is barely touched or heavily regulated comes down to a single question the Act keeps returning to: how much risk does this particular use create? If turning dense regulation into plain English is useful to you, consider subscribing to Compliance Decoded. We publish a new explainer every week for founders, compliance officers, and operations and legal teams. And tell us in the comments, which part of the EU AI Act would you like us to unpack in its own deep dive? Your questions genuinely shape what we cover next. Educational overview only, not legal or compliance advice. Consult a qualified professional for your situation.